Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. In the previous series I talked about ROS2, Gazebo Simulator, Linux, but for this one I'm gonna start a new series regarding Git and GitHub, because if you are working on a robotics projects, uh, especially like big projects, you are going to need to track the progress of your work, whether it's for debugging or for like pinpointing the issues in your project. And also you will need at a certain point to collaborate with other teammates to work together on a single big project. This will be more effective. So for this purpose, GitHub is really important, and I advise you to watch this video and the next ones in this series to get the hang of it. So my objective is to introduce you to Git and GitHub and introduce you to the way to navigate this system effectively, and to use it to make your life easier while working on programming and coding projects. So let's start by defining Git. So Git is a version control system. This means that if you are writing a certain code, you are developing a certain coding or programming project, it will allow you to track the modifications that you apply on your code as you do the work. Now, on the other hand, what is GitHub? GitHub is a hub of Git repositories. So this means this is a remote cloud-based hub of storage containers. Each storage container is called a Git repository that will allow the public to put their code on this cloud so that they can collaborate with other people to develop the project. So this is really important, as I mentioned before, for team collaborations and to track the progress of your work. So if I prepared a small diagram just to clarify what I mean by all of this. So this is the GitHub repo, which is the remote GitHub repository that I mentioned before, and this is, as I said, cloud-based, so you can access it online. And let's say that we are talking about one repository, so we have only one storage container, storage location, let's say, that will host a certain code for a certain project. So this way, what we can do if we are working in a team is that each member of this team can clone. So I'm using right now technical terms that will be repeated in the next videos. So every team member will clone the same GitHub repository on his local system or local computer. We're gonna call it, like, for example, clone 1 for the first system, clone 2 for the second computer, and clone 3 for the third one. So right now, every single team member can apply modifications to the cloned GitHub repository locally on his system, on his PC. And then after doing that, they can push the modifications toward the remote repository that everybody is sharing. And once this is done by one of the members, the other two members can receive these modifications by pulling the updated version of the remote GitHub repository, and then do additional modifications on top, and then do the pushing again and the pulling, and you got the point. So this is how the members can collaborate on big projects using GitHub. So this is why it's really important. Now, let's dive deeper into the functionalities. So, first we're gonna start by installing the Git system on our computer. Sudo apt update. And then we're gonna use sudo apt install git, and I'm gonna give it the answer of yes ahead of time. It's already installed in my case, I was using it before. Now the third step is to configure your Git system locally by specifying the name of the developer and the email. This is optional, but it will become essential and required in the future as we will see in the next videos in this series. So I'm gonna start by specifying the name. So in this case, it's gonna be a bed. That's my name. And then we're gonna specify the email address. So it's gonna be this. And then once we're done, it's a good practice to verify the version of Git, just to make sure it was installed correctly. So yeah, here you go, you have the version 2.34.1. So now we have Git. Now I would like to clarify the GitHub repository. Okay, so let's talk about the remote GitHub repository that is accessible online. So for this purpose, I'm gonna head to a certain repository. It's a random one that I picked, but you can pick any other repository online by going to GitHub and searching for all the repositories or the public repositories that you can find. So in this case, I'm gonna talk a bit about the structure of this GitHub repository. So we mentioned, as I mentioned before, it's a cloud-based storage location where people can put their project, their coding projects, their coding files inside, okay? And and what's inside this repository can change between one project and another, but you will always see some common directories, and I'm gonna talk about these. So first of all, you have the readme.md file. So this is the readme.md file. So this is a markdown file that includes the different instructions related to your GitHub repository. So for example, this GitHub repository was built to provide a project, a coding project that will allow the user to command and control a robotic arm. So the README file contains, in this case, the different instructions and commands, terminal commands, I can see them here, to use this GitHub repository to successfully command the robotic arm. So think about it as a user guide, okay, or a user manual. Another important directory is the .gitignore. So if you remember, I mentioned before that we have users that can clone the remote GitHub repository locally on their system, and they can do modifications on this cloned repository before pushing back the modifications to the remote one. But sometimes I don't know if you watched my video about like my videos about Rust 2. If you didn't, feel free to press on the link that's appearing right now on the top right corner to watch them. And when I talked about the Rust 2 workspace, I mentioned that we can build the workspace and it will automatically generate some directories. So like log and build and install based on the source files that we have written ourselves. So it doesn't make sense, it's not practical for a programmer or a coder to push all the directories that were automatically generated after building the Rust 2 workspace, because the information, the essential information that is needed by any user who will clone the repository on his system is what's included in the source directory, right? This is like the raw material that we created, that we wrote ourselves. But for the other files, the user can, on the other end, the user who cloned the repo can generate them himself. So there is no need, it will be a waste of storage space to push every single directory that was generated by the building system. So this is here comes the benefit or the importance of the .ignore directory. This .ignore directory or file, it's a file actually, it will contain the different directories that you want Git to ignore before pushing your local modifications to the remote GitHub repository. So for example, in here, log, build, and install were included, PyCache, other files that were generated automatically, okay? So this is a good practice if you want to do things effectively and professionally. Now you have the license directory. This will include the copyrights that are essential to protect your work and to tell the users who are going to clone your repository and use it, how to use it, let's say, in the correct frame, in the correct work frame, okay? So this includes all the rules that you impose on the user to follow while using your repository. So this is important to protect your work in a way. Now we have the doc directory, and this will include the different documentation files regarding your project. So this can include reports, this can include images that document the work inside your project. And finally, we have the .github repository. And by the way, every directory it's the .github directory. Every directory that includes dot at the beginning, it's a hidden one, okay? So if it doesn't appear inside your Files Explorer in here, you can press Ctrl H and you're gonna see it. So the .github includes the workflows, and the workflows will include, as you can see, .yaml files. And the importance of these files is to define what we call GitHub Actions workflows. And these are, let's call them tests. So each file is a test or a set of rules that will make sure that any modification pushed from a locally cloned GitHub repository. So let's say a user cloned the GitHub repository, applied some modification, and he wants to push back. When this user pushes back his modifications, they will go through the tests or the rules that are defined inside these files. And these will make sure that these modifications won't be pushed into the remote GitHub repository unless these rules are followed. Okay? So, in other words, these files are essential to automate the testing, the building, the formatting, or many other tasks, and they will be applied on any modification that happened on a local clone. So, for example, I can create a format file that will make sure that any pushed modification by any of the team members should follow a strict format guideline, okay? Otherwise, our work, me, for example, and my teammates, will not be consistent. Every single person will write the code in a different format. It will be a mess. But when I automate the formatting, testing, using this action workflow, I make sure that the format is consistent among the different team members' work. Okay? You can do similar thing for building. If you want to, for example, test if your modifications can be built successfully against a certain ROS2 distribution. For example, ROS2 Humble in this case. You create a file for that. So this way, before pushing your work, you make sure that it successfully builds against the ROS2 package, the ROS2 distribution, sorry. So you get the point. This is the importance of the .github workflows. Now, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Right now, you understand the importance of Git and GitHub, and you have a basic understanding of what is a GitHub repository. Now, in the next videos, we will dive deeper into the creation of your own GitHub repository or using the GitHub repository of someone else, okay? And then we are going to see how to navigate the local GitHub repositories on your system and use them effectively to make your life easier while working on big coding or programming projects. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please press like, and do not forget to subscribe for my channel to stay tuned for more videos like this. Alright, it was nice seeing you guys. Have a good one.